This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Our favorite Saturday workshop. We have a big presentation from IT, and it's our one time to deal with the Board of Ed. Alex, would you like to take us through your presentation?
Sure. Good morning to members of the board, taxpayers of North Haven who are watching live and on the internet. We're going to go through the Information Technology Department budget and requests for 2021, 2022. I'm going to start. The board has been provided with a packet that has a small presentation in it and some quotes for our capital expense requests. I'm just going to go through a real quick and high-level overview of that presentation. Just really take you through what we've accomplished, what we're trying to do, savings for the town, our estimated expenses for 21, 22, and our capital requests. So just a quick year in review. From last time we spoke, we've managed to migrate the town to a faster primary internet. We've implemented a newer website with a modern design and a new messaging platform with help from Valerie. We've done some repair of critical issues, upgrades, implemented offsite cloud backups. We're nearing completion of a 10 gigabit upgrade throughout town. We've worked on the Emergency Operations Center with the fire chief and police chief. And we've completed rolling out new dispatch center software with the police and fire. We also have a new IT member hire who is helping out tremendously right now during times of COVID. I'm looking at savings, and we're going to try and reduce our reliance on outside vendors for smaller roles, moving a printer, doing changes to adding a computer, things like that. We should be handling that internally, just because we're seeing a large skills gap between people coming in to do small jobs versus people who are trained to do specialties, Exchange, mail, SharePoint, other things like that. So we're also going to use open source solutions where feasible. We're shopping renewals to different suppliers at the request of our finance director. That's a move which has already yielded some savings on our renewals. And we're going to try and upgrade and renew some of our hardware for longer life cycles, and we're transitioning to cloud services. I'm just going to go into the estimated expenses for 21, 22 at the request of our finance director to get rid of some of the excessive lines we have in the town budget. We've consolidated 5 lines to 1 line for hardware, software, supplies, and labor. Our maintenance contracts line is in flux. We're reducing reliance on a vendor in that line and transitioning it to cloud and security services, primarily Office 365 and some other security products. The lines are relatively stable. I don't believe we've had any overages, and our budget is under projections for last year. My capital request is for the IT department is as follows. We're looking to implement a high availability firewall pair that can handle our multiple internet connections. This is to allow us to transition in the future to VoIP services and email services that will be hosted outside of the town. The data center is in need of a newer UPS. The current one is aged out. We're looking at implementing 2-factor authentication with some hardware tokens. And we're also looking at putting a server in our secondary data center, which is located at the police department. That total request is $60,000, and you have detailed quotes on each item. I'm not going to go into each individual item. for brevity's sake. But that is the budget for 2021, 2022, and if there's any questions, I can now field those.
The server, that's in case the system goes down, you transfer it to the police server?
Yeah, that's the goal, or what I've been working to since I started, was kind of to make that, since it's a newer building, climate controlled, secure. We're working on using that as a secondary data center so that if anything did happen, power loss, anything, we would fail over to that and still be able to provide services to police and fire who are operating 24/7 and still have services available to the town.
You mentioned the maintenance contract is in flux. What do you mean by that? You're negotiating?
Well, no, what we transitioned from what we were paying for outside vendors to do services, updates, maintenance, and monitoring. We've moved that in-house, so we're actually doing that ourselves now. And then we're gonna recoup that savings and also help move the town to a modern platform for email, which is Office 365, and we're working on that transition. So what's gonna happen is it goes down and it's gonna go up in respects. So it's in flux that we're changing it from who we've been traditionally paying to now a different vendor, and it's gonna be a different service, but it still will be in the maintenance contracts line.
Okay.
Michael, did you have any questions? We'll go around quick.
No, well, I just wanted to stress that your department, especially during these times when face-to-face customer service is now being suspended and may be phased out in some ways in the future, and certainly, with building permits and so forth, it's become more efficient not to do so. We want North Haven to be progressive technologically. So, we take any of your capital requests very seriously. And for the purposes that you state, we want this town to be able to perform with regard to security, communications, efficiency, and everything else. So I'm sure Mr. Frieda and the rest of this board will try to honor as much of what you're requesting as long as there's justification for it as possible. So thank you very much for being here this morning.
Alex, do most companies or the towns have their disaster recovery hosted offsite by third-party vendors? Is that more typical, or is this?
Well, I would say most towns have probably nothing as a secondary data center. Some towns have the option to host it at a secondary site.
Yeah.
You still need a lot of bandwidth between your primary and secondary site and connections, and their redundant connections. This connection to the police department, for all intents and purposes, is free because of the fiber we have run between the annex and the police department and the rest of town.
Yeah.
And it gives us a leg up should we have an issue. We have the emergency operations center. We're able to either work in the police department or work in the annex.
Right. Thank you.
Mike?
I just want to come back to what Mike said, just an example of what you were talking about, Michael, about being progressive with Alex. Two stories I want to share that be brief. Number one, when we hired Alex, we also interviewed one of the leading IT experts in this region. So after we hired Alex, the gentleman who didn't get the job called me, and he asked me why he didn't get the job. But before I was able to answer the question, he said, "Can you share with me who you hired?" So I told him we hired Alex, and he said to me, "Alex Linos? Now I understand why I didn't get the job." So that's a true testimony to Alex. But coming back to your point, I was on a statewide call the other day regarding IT, and mayors and first selectmen all across the state have storage capacity issues. We were one of the first municipalities to engage in body cameras for our police department. We're in a position now, not only do we still have great capacity for storage on body camera video that's required by state statute, but also Alex put a secondary server in place for the police car cameras. So we are much better off, based on your efforts, Alex, in terms of not having a capacity issue with storage still to spare when other municipalities now are scrambling to pay more money to buy more storage, particularly for body cameras and police car cameras. So I think you've done a great job.
Thank you. Diane, anything?
So your disaster recovery plan, have you actually tested it?
Well, we're still in the process of building the secondary data center. So currently, the police department just hosts a secondary set of backups for us.
So it's not connected right to actually test it?
No,
'Cause
not yet.
trust me, you need to.
I
I had one that we tested and it failed.
Oh, well, we definitely plan on testing it.
Right. My other question is about cloud. So I know cloud's the way to go, and
Yeah.
everybody thinks that cloud can't go down
Or
or it can't be hacked, and that is not true.
Correct.
So my question is, how do you feel about the security on the cloud, and what would you do to, like, again, if something were to happen, is that going to be a service? Is that something that you would handle?
So we're hoping to implement, at the same time moving to the cloud, kind of getting two-factor authentication on board, and that greatly reduces the amount of attacks or the attack surface for our hosted services in the cloud. Two-factor authentication is basically another factor. You either get a little pin sent to your phone, or you have a little device. Because of how many employees we have that don't have necessarily a town phone, we're looking at a hardware device, which was included in the packet here, that would be compatible with Office 365 or a hosted solution like that.
So, and then my other question is, you always have to weigh, is it cheaper to house it on-site or in-site? And,
Right.
you know, and that's a big discussion where I work. Is it cheaper to, sometimes it is cheaper to have it on-site versus having it off-site.
Right.
So just a general question.
So we're actually doing hybrid exchange, where we're keeping some mailboxes here for low use. So we'd still have a server here, but we want to be able to facilitate a lot of the benefits of the entire package that's offered with Office 365, which is, as you know, with COVID, the importance of Microsoft Teams and Zoom and being able to communicate remotely has become, irreplaceable. So to be able to provide those services to town employees so they're able to communicate remotely, it's a change. It's a major momentum change in how we conduct business. Primarily, we used to be able to meet face to face. I'm here today because I'm running the technology behind the scenes. So if anybody's wondering why the IT manager can present, that is why. But it's a sea change, and I think a lot of municipalities have no choice other than to move in this direction. We have a good base, and we could maintain some of our stuff on-prem for a longer time, but email is one of those things that there's fewer and fewer people who are really truly experts on how to manage an Exchange server. And as that expertise kind of goes down, diminishes, now we're losing. If we have a major issue, we end up calling Microsoft anyway. So better they have the platform to be able to manage it sometimes than trying to bring in several vendors to triage an issue.
My last question is around phones. Since everyone's doing things remotely, I'm full-time now, permanently remote. I don't have a phone. I'm doing voice over IP, so that's what we're all doing. No one has phones anymore. So do we still, a lot of people still have phones, or are they using that technology as well?
So a lot of people, a lot of our employees still use a regular phone. For our department heads, we have turned on mobile twinning in some cases where if their desk phone rings, their mobile phone rings as well, so they're able to have presence at least a little bit. Our system is older. It's Avaya. It's digital, it's
Yeah, I am familiar with the
very
system.
little, very little VoIP technology built into it. We're currently, I'm working with Ed and we have a vendor, a consultant that helps us with our communications, diversified communications, and they're basically finding us a bunch of different solutions. Some of them are modernizing this system or bringing it to a hosted solution, and some of them are complete replace every phone in town. We have to weigh that against the savings that we could recoup by going to a VoIP solution. We're gonna definitely have a lot less copper that we're paying for from the phone company. And I'm also getting a lot of quotes from Frontier, from Ring Central, from 8x8, just all these different vendors to try and find a package that's going to work best for the town to move to. So in the works.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jim, did you have anything else?
Yeah, you mentioned that you were reducing the lines from 5 to 1.
Yes.
My question is twofold. First,
Sure.
how is that accomplished? And secondly, is there a cost savings involved?
It's more of Ed can speak to it, but it's more of an administration issue. Our lines have grown and grown and grown and grown, and that's kind of his request is for each department to look at consolidating lines to one line. Traditionally, we had stuff broken up by hardware, software, vendor, labor.
Just to be clear, Alex,
Yeah.
you mean budget lines, right?
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
it's lines in the budget.
Yes.
We've consolidated from 5 to 1.
Correct.
And are we losing any information content in that consolidation? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right. No, go ahead.
No, because all the purchases, everything is still visible in those lines. There's nothing hidden.
Great.
They're just now, and a lot of things in technology, especially, are very. Is that hardware? Is it software? They kind of are in the middle of that divide. So having one line where we can kind of refresh computers with, purchase software with, is it's more again administratively it's more freedom, not necessarily and less overhead for managing, but you're not really losing any of that content. Again, Ed can speak to our ballooning of lines and how we have over 500 lines, I think, right now for different things. And this is mostly just to consolidate the IT department to one.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Nancy?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Again, just to build on what Mr. Frieda said, the backup storage for the body camera information from the police department, that is actually folded into the police department budget,
Correct.
not yours.
Correct.
Okay. So in terms of these USB device plugs, which departments in particular are using these plugs in order to access their information and provide another layer of security?
Nobody currently.
Okay.
We tested it internally in the IT department. It is something we would roll out slowly. Mostly it would just be a hardware second factor. It's literally just a little, when they type their password in, a little button you would push just to give you a second way to authenticate yourself that you're a human being in front of that computer and not somebody trying to hack in remotely.
Right. And I work for Yale University, and we definitely, as a university now, is using this two-factor authentication where you use your phone and you identify yourself and you get a ping through Dual Mobile. So if that's helpful at all. But and just kind of very generally speaking, do we have some level of assurance that the emails, at least within our town, are at least secure, or is that another source of vulnerability?
No, currently we're using a provider called Zix for, and they're actually used by Yale Hospital for encryption, threat protection, and archiving. And what that allows us to do is we have an easy to use interface to search for freedom of information requests through all our emails.
Got it.
We also have protection from them. We actually were getting a newer spam attack that was happening over and over again, and I reached out to the vendor, and they were able to correct it very quickly and see that it was a new attack that not any other of their customers had seen. And having that kind of level of not just reliability and performance, but customer service where you can actually get somebody on the phone at all hours of the night with a support issue is really important versus traditionally going to one person or a vendor that it's 5 o'clock, they're not working.
Okay, well, and I'd just like to echo Mr. Hallahan's point that certainly Alex's efforts to protect this town and all of the private information stored, not only in terms of individual hacks, but also the notion of ransomware, where our entire system could be taken over, and then we're at the mercy of whoever chooses to either delete it or we have to pay some amount of money in order to reaccess it.
And in response to that, we recently went through a penetration test where we actually had
That was my next question.
a good hacker come into our network and see what they would theoretically be able to do, what information they would theoretically be able to extract. And knock on wood, as of right now, he was not able to compromise our backups. So
Good.
That's
great.
We're working with them for a remediation plan to really get things secure. And we're also working with SCROG to increase the Regional Council of Governments to increase our employee cybersecurity training.
So that, yep. Yeah, and so that's what you mean by pen testing.
Yeah.
Is penetration testing. Got it. Okay. All right. So so then I have some more specific questions related to your budget here.
Sure.
The very first line of personnel full-time, as everyone can see, there was a 43% increase from 1920 to 2021. And then we can see that there's a requested 14% decrease from this current fiscal year to next year. But again, that's not really a decrease because if you look down lower, there's a $30,000 unemployment compensation. So it kind of cancels each other out. Is that
Right.
correct?
Yeah, I can't speak to the unemployment compensation from my line, but I can speak to the slight decreases because we filled a position at a lower pay rate than what we had in the budget for. So that would give us a little bit of savings
A
there.
little savings, about
Yeah.
$27,000. So that was my next question, was what is the new position and what is the function of this new
Yeah,
position?
so the new position we created was like a level 1 IT technician, not a network engineer. I didn't want to have 2 people doing the same job. So I have somebody doing our updates and monitoring, rolling out new computers, printers, assisting users on the phone, creating tickets, triaging. And that allows me to work on some of the projects that require engineering and project management.
Great. Okay, and then down a little bit further, again, under personal policy
Sure.
expenses, the very last line of contractual obligations, as we can all see, there was an enormous leap from 1920 to 2021 of, a factor of more than 10. So the question is, and there seems to be a little bit of a decrease in that from this current fiscal year to the proposed year of about 13%. So I guess my question, and maybe Ed can answer this, is why would this need to be within the IT department as opposed to the town?
This isn't
That's
IT.
not IT.
It's not
That's
IT.
personnel.
Right.
Yeah.
IT's just.
Oh, okay,
We're-
so it's just that this is
It's just on the same
page.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're
All
in
right, I'm
we're
confused
the,
by that.
We're the little box.
You're just the little
Yeah, we're
5
the
lines or
little
whatever.
box.
Got it.
Now
got
it's
it.
even smaller.
Now I totally understand. That
That's
makes
okay.
much more sense. Okay, and then I have some just very general
Sure.
questions. To what extent do the town and the BOE IT departments collaborate?
We collaborate in so much that my counterpart, Jennifer Kosniewski, we collaborate in as much as that we talk about initiatives that would work to assist us in better communication between our departments. Our goals are a little bit different. Our goal is to, protect the data of the town and be able to help town employees do their jobs more functionally. And they have more of a role to help their students, and they've gone towards a Google platform. We're going towards a Microsoft platform. So no, we don't have a ton of things in common in those spots, but we do have things in common in other areas, communications, phones. We're looking at the VoIP solution we were talking about. We're
Right.
looking at that holistically with the entire town, not just us, but BOE as well. We're also looking at the recent security project that was done in BOE with the cameras. We're looking at leveraging that and being able to use that in the police department and in the fire department to give our dispatchers access to the cameras at the schools.
Right.
So more often than not, we're intersecting at different points.
Right.
And we work very well together.
I'm glad to hear that you work together. It's more a question of economies of scale.
Yeah.
And to the extent that, one is Google and one is Chrome.
Right.
Obviously there's different functions for the town versus the Board of Ed.
Right.
But to the extent that we can be capitalizing on all being on the same system, using the same kinds of lines, it sounds like the library is kind of caught in the middle.
Right.
In
They are.
terms of their
Technology,
access to
yeah.
the internet as well as their IT functioning. It sounds like they're.
Yeah, we provide them support, but they also have support through the Lion Group. So we assist when needed. They take care of some of their IT, but we provide them assistance as well. So
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, and then just lastly, again, this is a very general
Sure.
question, just kind of looking forward, again, with the unknown of what the future holds for all of us, not just
Yeah.
this town, but for everyone. I'm just wondering what kind of IT solutions can be offered to provide our town meeting form of government with a greater voice in our town meeting. And
Yeah.
in particular, with respect to public commentary at meetings, but also looking forward to our budget development process and what our public hearing and our budget town meeting will look like in terms of really being able to provide the people of North Haven, both those that have internet access as well as those that do not have internet access, with a voice in how the taxpayers' money is spent.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if I could, please. Nancy, I respect your question, but it's really broad.
It is.
It's not in this budget. It's not, I don't think, in the 5-year capital plan. So I'm not saying it's not a worthy conversation. I just don't know it's worthy for a budget that, oh, by the way, is less than 0.5% or 1% of the town budget here. So we got the Board of Ed coming up, and we're going to lead Alex into a broad discussion, I'm afraid, here
No.
on something that's not even in the budget.
Nancy, do you have anything related to his budget?
Well, I think this is absolutely pertaining to his functioning in
His
our town.
His function and his budget are two different things. Is there anything in the budget he's presented that you have additional questions on?
Is there any additional money that you need in order to better serve the people of North Haven and provide a stronger voice in our town meeting form of government during a pandemic? That's my question.
I believe we can do whatever is necessary to help facilitate better communications within our current budget. There are different levels of Zoom that we can purchase or upgrade to that have more features. But again, when we talk about skills gap, it's really finding people who are able to run that. I've been at every one of these workshops, and you have to monitor it, make sure nobody's doing anything bad on Zoom. So
Absolutely.
those, yes, there are more things we can certainly do, and we can do it within our current budget format. But those ideas or proposals don't always start in IT. We're given the mandate, go find a way to do this, and
Sure.
then we will do that, and then come back with several choices for a solution.
Right. I was just hoping, we've been 10 months now, almost 11 months now with this void in public input. So I was just hoping that there might be some IT solution going forward because we don't know what the next year will look like. So
Yeah,
thank you.
there are, and I could certainly investigate it when given that mandate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank
And if we take a 5-minute break while I reset the Board of Ed.
It's a lot, yeah.
We are back. If the Board of Ed could see what I brought, because we're working on your budget,
Magnifique.
would you like to take us through it, please?
Can you hear?
Patrick?
Yes, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I have trouble hearing a little bit.
No problem. You can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you. Let me just share my screen, make sure.
Oh, we got a PowerPoint.
I would ask we do the same thing. Let them complete their presentation, and then we'll do a round of questions.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman, for stepping out of turn.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Because we had a person present, I thought we were just going to be at
No,
normal.
it's, yeah, the normal way of us doing things. But we are, in this kind of format, they can't tell who's walking.
That's great. I fully appreciate it.
All right, can everyone see my screen okay?
We're good.
Okay. Well, I can kick off if everyone's ready. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. So good morning, everybody. Good morning, Board of Finance. Today, I will be presenting the Board of Education's budget recommendation for the 2021-2022 school year. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce and to thank Mr. Howard Wardlow. He's the new district's Director of Finance, Operations, and Human Resources. Howard's tireless work and countless hours organizing and crunching numbers provided a comprehensive foundation for the Board of Education to begin its budget process. There's very little change to the overall budget at all levels and within all departments. The majority of the increases are a result of contractual obligations and cost of benefits. Within this year's budget recommendation, there are no new programs. There is a recommendation to add one full-time and one part-time position. Howard and I will highlight areas that have significantly increased or decreased and the reasons for these changes during the presentation. We have spent time with building principals and department directors to reduce wherever possible while ensuring that we are meeting all obligations and staying true to the district's mission. As we know, special education is the most unpredictable and fluid area of the budget because it's dependent on the needs of students. This is the area with the greatest number of variables, and it is vitally important to project accurately. No matter how accurate we project, the biggest unknown is the amount of money we will receive from the state in the excess cost reimbursement. The budgeting process is one of the most important tasks the district and the Board of Education take on to reach the objectives within our mission statement. Our draft mission statement is as follows. It is the mission of the North Haven Public Schools in collaboration with students, parents, and community to develop responsible, educated, and productive global citizens who can thrive in an ever-changing digital world. A vision statement focuses on tomorrow and the expectations the Board of Education has for all students. As a result of their experiences in the North Haven Public Schools, every student will acquire the skills necessary to meet the demand of the 21st century and leave the district college and career ready. North Haven's draft Portrait of a Graduate reflects the skills and dispositions expected of our students. This is an important component to the budget planning process. It provides direction and frames how the district will utilize the allocated funds. In pursuing this mission and vision, we believe we must provide opportunities for all students to independently, collaboratively, and creatively solve rigorous everyday problems. Honor and value empathy and compassion for all individuals throughout our diverse community. Support all students in making strong and positive contributions to their community. provide all students with a safe learning environment to explore their strengths and vulnerabilities to develop self-worth, and support each other in times of challenge. As we focus on the budgeting process, my responsibility is to collaborate with district leaders to design a fiscally responsible budget that ensures equitable and developmentally appropriate educational experiences between schools, safe and clean learning environment, fulfillment of statutory obligations, and continue to advance Board of Education goals. As part of this responsibility, we are incredibly sensitive to both the broad educational needs of our students and the resources we are expending to address those needs. In creating this budget recommendation, we were committed to maintaining these priorities. Maintain the district's focus on improving achievement for all students. Adjust instructional needs associated with the recovery of COVID-19. Meet all contractual obligations. Meet the 2023 graduation requirements. And address the social and emotional needs of all learners by beginning to increase the level of support services within our schools and programs. The proposed budget recommendation provides the following: resources to educate over 3,000 students, mental health, nutrition, and medical care to allow students to access instruction, specialized services required for all students to meet their potential, diverse opportunities for students to engage in activities outside of their curricular pursuits, and transportation to and from school. So there are many internal and external factors that drive the budget each year. Internally, student enrollment, contractual increases such as salaries and vendor contracts, including transportation, special education, and medical benefits. They all play a part. Student enrollment has been relatively steady for the past 3 to 4 years. This current year, I believe, it is an exception due to the pandemic. The district will be negotiating the teacher's contract as well as the clerical and paraprofessional contract this year. We continue to review vendor contracts, especially around student services, to find potential savings. Externally, the state of the state and federal education revenue, state and federal mandates always come into play. Overall, the state has been rather quiet in regards to mandates, but the big question every year is the district's special education excess cost reimbursement, which plays a huge role in the budgeting process. This slide reflects North Haven's per pupil expenditure in relation to our district reference group. North Haven currently ranks 12th out of 24 DIRG D districts. North Haven is consistently in the middle of the pack within our DIRG. The average per pupil expenditure for DIRG D is $17,789. North Haven spends $161 less per student per year than this average. Our budget would cost the town $483,000 more per year if we spent the average DIRG D per pupil expenditure. We wisely use our resources to get the most out of our funds, and North Haven continues to rank well in the state in multiple areas. The 2020-2021 approved budget is $57,324,245. The Board of Education's proposed budget recommendation for the 21-22 school year is $58,470,730. This requested increase for the 2021-2022 school year is $1,146,485. This reflects a 2% increase. This 2% increase will meet our contractual obligations, healthcare benefits, and increases in facilities and educational equipment and software. There are no new programs included within this increase. An additional school psychologist position is included to continue to prioritize the social and emotional needs of all learners, as well as a part-time human resources clerk. As we begin planning for next year, it is a real possibility that districts will be required to provide remote learning and maintain many of our current COVID-19 protocols for the 21-22 school year. Due to recent infrastructure upgrades, we are confident in our ability to live stream from all of our classrooms and will not need to add any significant staff as we needed to do this year. I will now turn the next few slides over to Howard. He will provide an overview and address the major budget drivers.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning, Board of Finance members. The next few slides, as Patrick alluded to, will attempt to provide you a visual and a graphical view of the budget. This first slide provides the board a visual of the expenditures by category, broken out by the portion they are of the total budget. As you can see, the four largest categories, salaries, benefits, transportation, and special education tuition, are all non-discretionary spending and make up roughly 88% of the total budget. If you add utilities in there as an additional non-discretionary spending category, it pushes the total to over 90% of the budget. So as you can see, non-discretionary spending plays a large part in the Board of Education's budget. Next slide, please. This chart is a comparison of the averages for DIRG-D for the fiscal year 2018-19, which is the latest data available. Please note the amounts utilized are from the state's EFS site, where they include expenditures from grants in these calculations, whereas our 21 and 22 numbers for the budget are simply our operating budget expenditures. That being said, we included those even though it is not an apples-to-apples comparison. If we simply utilize the 18-19 numbers for both the state, the average for the DIRG-D and for North Haven, you can see the averages in the salary, supplies, and facility categories are below the averages for the DIRG-D and above and then the benefits, purchase services, and tuition categories above the average. Next slide, please. The following chart breaks out the budget expenditures by category, the percent of the total budget, and their dollars and percentage change year over year. The key takeaway from this slide is the first three categories. I would like to call your attention to the year-over-year change. These are contractual changes, with transportation having a small contingency in addition to the contractual agreement. Since these three categories make up 83% of the budget, they alone account for a weighted average of 2.3% increase year over year. Since this year's budget increase is 2%, that means other categories need and have been cut to get to the budget to a 2% increase. Next slide, please. The following chart is simply the budget drivers broken out between those that have increased and those that decreased year over year. It is a different way to present the prior slide. And as you can see again, if we just had the non-discretionary spending, you can see it would be 1.4 million for things that increased, and therefore we had to decrease other areas to get to the 1.1 budget total for the year. Next slide, please. The final slide that I will speak to is discretionary versus non-discretionary expenditures. The following chart breaks down the expenditures by these two categories. As you can see, non-discretionary spending, of which salaries, benefits, and transportation are included, make up 95.9% of the budget. This chart is simply showing that the largest portion of the budget is for expenses that must be paid at the agreed upon rates, which generally speaking are increased by an average of 2.5% to 3% plus per year. And if you look at the medical, most times it's even higher than that. So again, but the bulk of the budget, the point I'm trying to get across is the bulk of the budget is non-discretionary spending that we have to contractually pay.
All right, thank you, Howard. As I stated earlier in the presentation, there are two new positions added to this budget. A new school psychologist who will focus on providing support to the district's therapeutic learning services was included in this year's recommendation. The position is needed to support our current learners, but also will serve to bolster our in-district programming and allow for out-of-district students to return to North Haven. The second position is a part-time human resources clerk. This position is needed to assist in meeting the necessary HR needs. North Haven is known for its commitment to education and the community support of the Board of Education's annual operating budget. I look forward to our collective work as we continue to deliver an exceptional education to the children and families of North Haven. Thank you all for listening to our presentation, and thank you for all that you do for the town of North Haven.
Thank you, Patrick. Mr. Hallahan?
Good morning, all, and thank you very much for being with us today. Happy to have Mr. Wardlow as our Director of Finance there over at, on the education side. Every year I might mention a little bit of the same thing, and that's as a preface. I wanted the public to know that this board, only allocates a lump sum for education, and we do not set specific levels for any line items. And the Board of Education itself is allowed to change line items throughout the year, but of course cannot spend more than the aggregate budgeted amount that the Board of Finance approves or that the town votes for. So with that in mind here, we like what we see today. Because with a 2% increase, some people would say that your budget request for the upcoming year is quite reasonable. As far as I know, it's the lowest requested percentage increase of the last 10 years. Yet it comes on the heels of the current year's 5% jump, which I did oppose. I did vote no, and that was spelled N-O. Before that, oh, by the way, it was passed by this board because Chairman Monaco and others did believe, rightfully so, that COVID uncertainties merited acceptance of your expense items as presented. But that atypical budget of last year came after the previous increase of 2.9%, where I believe you might have underfunded or overlooked a couple major line items. So in this yo-yo-like fashion, can we expect a budget request next year of like 5 or 6%?
No, I would not anticipate a budget presentation of being that high.
Okay.
Next year.
All right, well,
Let's stick with this year's budget.
oh, okay. 1 year at a time, all right. Well, as a reasonable supporter of education, which everyone on this board is, I understand that labor contracts typically increase about 2.5% to 3% a year. And I'm not sure if that may or may not include steps. And you did already present some slides about the non-discretionary nature of a lot of the budget. Of course, the non-discretionary labor contracts can be influenced in terms of 10-year experience and pay level. Yeah. So, which is why retirements sometimes are welcome as an unfortunate loss of experience, but beneficial to the budget. Next year, the teacher's contract for the upcoming year. Well, what was the cost of living increase on that, and was there any steps involved in pay rate, pay changes in the upcoming year?
So yes, there were cost of living. I'll let Howard, if you have that up, and there were step increases as well. If you are step within those that step range, if you haven't quote unquote stepped out yet, you will actually receive a step increase, and I believe correct me if I'm wrong, Howard, cost of living increase can do that as well. So go ahead, Howard.
And again, yeah, it's in the salary, and it's not just the teacher's contract; it's the other contracts as well. There are step increases as well as what I saw. It's very interesting because it's something that I haven't seen before from this role. Generally, you see just a flat percentage increase. In the contracts I'm seeing now, what you're seeing that the table actually changes, and that's the inflationary increase, but you also get a step increase. So it's not, the table may increase by 2.5%, but you're also getting a step increase that's also increasing your wage. So your wage increases can end up being a 5% range based on the step plus the increase in the wage tables. You're absolutely correct. You're getting the double step, the double increase.
And we are in, is it year 2 of a 3-year contract?
Yeah, we will be negotiating with the teachers in this spring and summer. And actually, I just would also like to mention that since, I'm not sure prior to me, but since I have begun here, I've reached out to Mr. Monaco and invited him to, or a representative of the Board of Finance, to participate in contract negotiations as well. I think I actually just sent him an email yesterday regarding the upcoming negotiations for paraprofessionals and clerical.
Yeah, I was going to volunteer his time because I think he'd be very valuable within the room. So
Yes.
yes.
And he was, Mr. Monaco was present also for our administrator negotiations earlier last year.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. I'm sure he'll keep me on speed dial. I like that. On the administrator's side, you had eliminated, I believe, one administrator in the previous budget, but then through adjustments, you put one on as a, I don't know if it's the same one, a temporary in the high
It's an
school.
administrative assistant. It's actually not in the administrators union, and it came at no increase to the budget. It's still in the teachers union. It has a stipend associated to it, but it is not in the administrator's contract.
Okay, all right, very good. The other big item, I talk big items first, and then I let Diane handle the smaller stuff. The health insurance line here, the health insurance, you have it budgeted as a 1.2% increase. I have to probably,
It's more than that,
maybe
right?
that's the first,
It's
Huh?
more than that.
7?
Yeah, he says it right here.
So I'll answer that question. I'll alleviate your question right there. So it is a 1% budget increase year over year, budget to budget, but that's from last year's budget. That's your starting point when you're talking 1.2%. Actually, what's happening is there's a new projection of where we're going to end the year, which is going to be the actual expense. The actual expense from actual expense to where the new budget is projected for next year is actually a 7.7% increase overall. So it's your starting point. If you're going last year's budget to this year's budget, yes, it's 1.2%, but it's where the actual expense is going to end, and we're projecting next year's budget is the 7.7% increase.
The verbiage says 2.2%. Under number 5 on the budget highlights. I didn't do the math, Mike obviously did the math. but-
Well, that may be all insurances combined. I was
Right.
looking at 201B, the hospital insurance line.
Looking, yeah. So if we're talking just the medical, yes, correct. It's the medical is 1.2%, and then that's budget to budget. But if you go from where the actual expense is to where we're projecting it to be next year, it's going to be a 7.7% increase.
Yeah, Tim, if you want to look at my budget, it's lower than yours, so you could use this one. Well, I have to defer to Mr. Swinkowski on this maybe, because that the 1.2% budget to budget is, as an increase, is that realistic? Because I don't, did the number, Howard, did the number come from finance for you to plug in, or was that?
No, that's from Anthem. That's the actuaries at Anthem. That's the number they gave us.
Okay, well, just defer for 1 second. On the town side, we budgeted an increase of 22%.
Right, we took what Brown and Brown gave us, and we had a deficit, so there was additional money added into it. That's why you have that increase, because if you look at the audit report, you'll see that fund is running at a deficit
A deficit up for both sides, or?
on the town
or
side.
Just on the town side?
Yeah, no, my number is just the town side.
So, okay, so, and so, 22% versus 1.2%?
Well, 500,000 of it was to catch up for the deficit, so you could take that out. Otherwise, it probably would have been 6%, I think it was.
And that deficit, so we're not covering the Board of Ed deficit?
Not at all, no. They do that and take care of that in their own budget.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll have an insurance meeting at some point where we can talk over the budgeting on this. Yeah, last year there was a surplus at the end of the year, but I guess approximately 500,000, and that is going toward health insurance reserves. Is that correct?
Well, right now it's being held in a fund at the town. And if again, it's being held as a contingency because of the potential COVID expenses that could arise during the year. However, at the year end, I proposed to the Board of Ed that they should consider putting that into health reserves. If the funds aren't utilized by the end of this year, that's where they should be utilized. I'm recommending that to the Board of Ed. It hasn't been decided yet that that's
Right, because I think that our insurance agents have said that being self-insured, we need to have greater reserves.
On the Board of Ed, yeah, correct, sir. On the Board of Ed side, the reserve is, the actuaries are telling us we should have between 900,000 and 1.6 million. Currently, we don't. We have around, if you take out for the IBNR, you probably have about 500 to 600,000. So you're under reserved at this point in time on the Board of Ed side. However, if you add those funds in, we would at least get to the bottom, the minimum that the actuaries are requiring that we suggest that they have.
I was going to ask you if either on the town side or on the education side, whether we needed to have additional budgeting for reserves. But it seems as though we're approaching a safer amount. Okay. All right, I have more questions, but not this time.
Before we go on, your capital items, you didn't mention those at all. Are they coming from outside the budget? Are you gonna fund them from the reserve?
The $83,000 for 21-22,
Yes,
they are in the operating budget.
they're in the operating budget.
Oh, yeah.
So you have 15,000, I'll just, if the members aren't, if they're gonna look at the page, but 15,000 entrance mats at the high school, 22,000 Green Acres sidewalk replacement, 26 exterior wall panels at Montelese. I'm not quite sure what that is. 12,000 for a mower and 8,000 for a forklift.
So, actually, there's some things are in the operating budget, some things are not, because again, partially, we have also, and I'm sure Ed has explained this to you, that we have funds on
Yes.
account for the capital budget. So some of those will be coming out of that, and others will be coming out, and again, facilities manager gave, I'm understanding the replacement carpets and the replacement mower and are coming out of the operating budget, and the other pieces will be coming out of the funds that are on deposit with the town.
Okay, Ed, if you could just, I'm sorry, I was looking at you back there.
No, it moves over.
Moved over.
Excuse me, Mr. Monaco, we
Yes.
can't hear you well.
Oh, I was just asking Ed to just update us on splitting those capital items up a little bit.
Maybe I moved the
Okay,
mic.
I'm not sure, we can't see you, so I'm not sure if it's your microphone or not, but I know
I have
the
two,
board
I got two, I have actually two microphones.
You got two
I'll start
microphones.
speaking louder.
Thank you.
Moving on, I just have one question before I give it to Tim, unless Tim wanted to ask it too. Howard, do you have any idea how much your carryover is gonna be for this year in funds?
So, sure. So, just two pieces to that, right? So again, right now, we've currently received, and so again, there's COVID expenses still in the operating budget that haven't been reimbursed back to the town, back to the Board of Ed yet. So we are still having those in our operating budget. So at this point in time, I don't see that there will be significant amount of funds. Perhaps in the one of the lines, there's about 100,000 in the insurance line, because all insurance premiums have been paid, and so it's over budgeted, it appears, by about $50,000. 82,000 to be exact. I think utilities may be a little bit over budgeted. There may be a little bit of money there. I'm not sure on that one, because again, the ebb and flow of pricing. However, in the reserves, I do believe for the medical reserves, between medical and dental, probably be about a $350,000 reserve. That'll be left over, surplus that'll be left over there. I think that, again, I would recommend to the Board of Ed that it get approved, that go into medical reserves. For the balance of the budget after that, I don't see any additional funds left over at that point.
I would appreciate it if, maybe beginning of March, you could just update the finance director as to where that might be then, so we can
I
take
will
that
do
into
that.
consideration.
I will do that.
Tim, have questions for,
Thank you, Mr. Monaco, and fortunately, you and Mike covered one or two of my questions. That's fine, though. Patrick, I guess maybe more to alert people in the room, but also those at home. Just back on CapEx for a minute, although it's not in next year's budget, it looks like you've got all the elementary school roofs slated for replacement over the next 5 years, is that right?
That's correct.
Right. And the number $1,250,000, where was that arrived at from?
You broke up a little bit there.
Sorry, they're all budgeted at $1,250,000, and I understand they're a little bit in the future, but where did that number come from?
Our facility director pricing out roofs in the past, I'd say within the past few years.
Right.
We do have some life left in the roofs, probably in 5 to 7 years. I believe Ridge Road and Clintonville are probably the ones that need to be replaced first within 7 years or so.
All right, thank you. So just one or two questions, please. So there was the CAA passed in December, part of the CARES Act, and now we have a potential new bill coming to Congress soon. Do we have any insight into whether or not that's going to provide additional funds for the Board of Ed locally here?
So yeah, if we were just approved, or the ESSER 2 grant has just been presented to all the districts, and we have been entitled to about $947,000 for COVID-related expenses. And the intention of the ESSER grant is not necessarily to supplant the operating budget, but to provide additional support due to COVID-related expenses. Some of those items that we're looking at right now are providing extended day services during this school year and next school year, providing a summer school program this year and next year. The good thing about this ESSER 2 grant is that it does not need to be spent until 2023. So we have some time to really look at how to support our students. And another cost that we're going to apply for this ESSER grant is our deep cleaning for the rest of the year, which is about $135,000 to get our students back in 5 days a week. We're working on those COVID-related expenses now.
Could you, that grant was called a what? You sound like you said SO2.
ESSER.
ESSER, it's the Emergency Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. It's under the CARES Act.
Okay, thank you.
anything else?
1 second. One or two questions just on the line items. I was kind of surprised by the utilities. I know I just heard Howard say that they may come in even under budget this year, but I'm just kind of surprised that between the electric and the heat and the gas, we think that's actually your largest reduction, $170,000. So why is that?
So I actually performed an analysis on what went through the budget in the 1920 year. We have 4 basic vendors that we pay. We pay United Illuminating, Champion Energy, which is a California corporation. We pay there's a solar project that we had, and we pay Johnson Controls. Johnson Controls is a given contract, so I know those that set monthly fee exactly what it's going to be for the next year. The other 3 items, I actually compared the trend in July and November, the bills that I had versus what we paid last year, I think July, November, last fiscal year. I then did that out for the full year. I did this United Illuminating Champion and the solar company. I got the trend, I got what I'm projecting to be this year's, what the number is based on what the current trend is an increase. And then I took that number and I increased it by, for United Illuminating, increased it by 10%. I kept it flat for Champion, even though Champion overall looks like it goes down 9.8% every year. I kept it flat. And then I also, for the solar fund, I kept it flat. I put a small contingency in there. After that analysis came up, I came up with the $1,075,000 for the electrical. The budget last year was $1,185,000. I can't answer to what the public $1,185,000 was arrived at. I just can answer to the calculation that I'm coming up with this year based on the trend and based on the trend year over year. I'm sure what I'm going to try and do is, as I look at these things, I'm going to try and provide more of a scientific or methodical method as to how I come up with these numbers. So that's how I went about this. I did that for the electrical, for natural gas, and then for the water. And that's how I came up with those numbers.
And which is Champion? Is that the natural gas? Who's Champion?
Champion, I believe, is the deal of the town. But we work this part of the town. I would have to answer for that. I just know it's Cal Fine Corp. It's something to do with the with energy reduction. I don't know the entire process.
I would say that's the supply part of it.
Board of Ed working with the town.
Yeah, it's
I think it's the supply part.
Yeah, it's the supply portion of what we did with Johnson Controls.
Okay. All right, and then one more question. So one of the bigger increases is transportation. I do know you have a new bus contract. Is that simply just the increase in the bus contract?
So there's a 3% increase in the bus contract year over year. What is also involved in that is there's additional, the fuel, we're paying the fuel on our side now as opposed to through the contract, which was what happened in the prior contract.
I saw that.
The total cost, so we have 25 standard buses, 30 vans, and 3 mini buses. There's a standard price for those. 181 days is what we have to do. We have to pay them, right? Regardless if they run or not, that's part of the contract. We did negotiate in that when the schools are remote or closed, we're only paying 90%, so we did get a 10% reduction there. It's going to, the total cost is about 3.57 million. For the bus, and then there's a small contingency that I put into the special ed transportation, because again, special ed is the largest variable of this budget in the sense that you don't know who's moving in, who's moving out, what students are going to be transporting, where they're going to be transported to. So that has a small contingency in there to get it to a 4.3% increase.
I yield.
Diane?
All right, I'm gonna start with the capital question first. So the last time I was at the high school, the walkways walking into the high school were cracked. And I actually brought it up to Phil, Diana, multiple times, and I'd see parking lots. So I don't know, does that cover the walkway, or did they do something about the entrance? There were a lot of cracks walking into the high school, so I was just surprised it wasn't listed unless it's under repairing the parking lot.
I don't believe it's under repairing the parking lot. I know Phil has looking a lot at that, so I have to double check to see if there's been some. I know there wasn't a huge overhaul to the walkway, but I will double check to see if it's been addressed recently.
Yeah.
I know after the winter months, it does tend to look pretty shabby sometimes, as most of our sidewalks do in the spring. So there's some patchwork that's required.
All right, yeah, I'd be interested in that, because I brought that up to him a while ago, so thank you.
Sure.
Going back to the budget highlights, it talks about, classroom supplies, utilities, expenditures, and I see a lot of these things going down. So if I look at, and again, I'm not sure what's other supplies, but I see that going down. I see instructional new equipment, replacement, I see all those going down. So my question is, in those reductions, what's the impact to the students? Is there an impact to the students, or did we not budget these right, or what's the reasoning for those categories going down? And maybe you can explain what other supplies includes.
So there's no impact to students. If we look just before we get to other supplies, if we look at instructional supplies, Howard and I looked over the 4 elementary schools as well as the middle and high, and we noticed that there is a differential between from from school to school, but what is attributed to each student at that school. So we came up with a per student price, and I think we ended up at $100 per student at the elementary level. In prior years, it ranged from like 96 to about, I don't know, 115, I think, right around there. So we leveled it out at 100, and obviously had conversations with principals and made sure that they had everything they needed within their buildings. And additionally, because we've been remote a little bit this year, we were March through June last year remote. We do have some other supplies in the building that we can utilize beginning next year and through the rest of this year. So I think we're in good shape around those instructional supplies. Howard, I'll let you hit the other supplies.
So in last year's other supply number was 612B, which you see is zero last year. It was the paper. So there's $50,000 worth of paper it's flat, so it's flat year over year in essence because it's being taken out of there. That's the differential that you're seeing there.
Okay, let me just ask one question. Last year, if I recall correctly, I had asked the question about actually weather and what would be the impact if there was like a big storm, and how would the kids learn if there was an event, right? And we talked about Chromebooks, and I think at the time, if I recall correctly, I think it was like kindergarten and first grade, they really didn't have them at that level. And then who knew a month later, after I asked that question, we'd be in a pandemic. So I guess my follow-up question to that is, we must have gotten the kindergartners and everybody, all students must have Chromebooks at this point, correct?
Correct. Yes, last year I remember the question, at the K1-2 level, we had grade level laptop carts that could be shared in each building. But as we went remote in March, I believe March 11th, and then our IT really hopped on making sure, because the ability for districts to get Chromebooks nowadays is, you need to be waiting months, 6-8 months sometimes. So luckily our director hopped on that very quickly, and we were able to provide one-to-one devices for the start of the school year. We had a nice pickup over the summer. Also, we're connected for this year.
Okay, I assume, but I just needed to ask because I know I brought that up, and then a month later, look where we were. Instructional supplies, what is that considered? Is that like subscriptions to, I mean, everybody's doing everything online now. Is that a subscription to programs, or what exactly? Just curious as to what that is. And then, again, other
instructional supplies are really what the students use within the classroom.
So it's within the class. So is it programs and different tools that they're using for learning?
If it's like you're referring to digital type tools,
yes,
and stuff, those fall on a different line in that. Or you have to correct me on where those are.
Are those other purchase services?
It's under. Part of it's under communications and network, because there's stuff in there, but there's also, I believe, like, I'm gonna have to, part of that's not under instructional supplies. Instructional supplies are, as Patrick said, that's in classroom stuff, but there is a different line, and I apologize, I don't have it offhand where it is, but there is a separate line. I can get you that in.
Okay, and if we had to purchase, since this whole pandemic, have we had to purchase additional digital platforms because of everybody being, remote?
We've actually purchased quite a few, from Gizmo to Coursera, just different names. We have Capstone, folks at the elementary, which are digital readers for students. So we've purchased a few, and a lot of those have been, we've been able to offset those costs through some the ESSER 1 grant, I believe, Howard. So a lot of those have not hit our budget.
Correct. Approximately 100 I want to say it's about 180,000 of the 213,000 we got for the ESSER1 grant was spent on digital type subscriptions and programs.
Okay, so another question, since at one point everybody was remote, how was the technology? Were there problems? Like I haven't heard much from my daughter since she's been remote that there's been a problem, but just curious, like, did you guys need to upgrade anything to make that work? And how is it working from a technology standpoint?
So we did need to upgrade in October. That's the reason we do have an opt-out program, which are students who and their families have chosen to learn from home this school year. At the beginning, over the summer, we did not have the capability to live stream from all classrooms. So we created the opt-out program where students have the ability to learn from home. And then in October, the way our IT director describes it, because that's not my forte, we had a 2-lane highway. We were able to increase it to a 4 or 5-way highway to ensure that we could live stream from classrooms. So from that point forward, I believe in December, we started having cameras in all of our classrooms, so students could, outside of the opt-out program, if they choose not to come to school and they feel more comfortable learning at home, they can meet right into their classrooms with their teachers and their classmates.
Okay, well, I mean, my daughter's one that has opted out right now, so, and I know it's working, I haven't heard anything, but I knew at the end of last year, I know there was some issues, that's why I was asking about if we had to
Yeah, we
do
did
some
provide
upgrades.
some upgrades there. And I believe it was at a minimal cost because the government somehow supported that. And I believe it was, Howard, correct me wrong, Jen K may have said around $500 to $1,000 to upgrade, which wasn't very impactful for the amount of benefit that we had.
It was a minimal cost upgrade,
Yeah.
absolutely. And just to follow up on your question, the licenses and software are in line item 5900 other purchases.
That's, okay, that's what I kind of thought. And that makes sense, right? If it, with the remote having to increase everything. From my perspective and what I see, my daughter's not complaining about anything. I know we had to get through it last year. That's why I figured somewhere in here we had to do some upgrades and we had to purchase more services for these children to do learning. So, I personally think it's working out well. I have no complaints from my daughter. She doesn't come out and say, hey, the network's down or anything. So I think the way you handled that and how it's in here is awesome. And I just, back to my question, who knew that question would actually from last year come to light? So I think you guys did a really good job in handling that, and it makes sense. And I assumed it was in here and just wanted to verify that the things that you needed to do and the tools were all in here as some of these increases.
Thank you, I appreciate that. We've also been able to, students who had some connectivity troubles, been able to provide them hotspots in their houses to improve their Wi-Fi connection. So that's been helpful for a few of our families.
And again, I think you guys are doing an awesome job. It was a hard job to do, thrust into last minute. Just in talking to other parents, no one's complaining about, that there's a problem with the technology. So kudos to you guys. It took a while. Of course, who anticipated this, but it's working. We could see it here, the cost, and we can't help that. But I think you guys handled it well, and I'm glad to see that we've even purchased more online services for these kids to learn and give them opportunities. And I think that's it for me for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Do you have any thoughts about coming for the rest of the school year? I know you were right last year.
I don't know about that.
It's a ball or is it a shot?
I don't know. I'll have to think about that. But when that happened, I was just, I couldn't believe that had happened. And a bunch of my friends had known that I had asked that question. And like, how did you even come up with that? I'm like, I don't know. And then I remember I was working remote when that happened. And when that phone went off and I saw North Haven schools, I'm like, oh, they're getting out. And that's when it happened. But no, if I come up with anything, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Jim?
Okay. Couple of things. Tim took my thunder on the utilities, 170 grand. So last Sunday night, I was watching television and I noticed North Haven schools were closed. Monday night, I noticed North Haven schools were remote learning. Now that we know that we can teach remotely, has there been or will there be any consideration to doing away with snow days?
So far this year, we haven't had a snow day. Each of those 3 quote-unquote snow days have been remote learning days. The only guidance we've received so far this year from the state is they're only allowing quote-unquote snow days to be remote days for this year, and I'm not sure if that'll be extended into next year.
Okay.
And I think we may be having one again on Monday.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, another area that concerns me was the substitute teachers. You have full-time non-certified, part-time non-certified, I guess they used to be aides, and substitutes certified. I noticed since sitting in this chair the past 8 years, it's been creeping up every year. So I took a look at area towns. I tried to find an area town comparable to North Haven. Unfortunately, I couldn't. I did find one town that is close to your figures in the budget, and it's the town of West Haven. And West Haven's budget for substitutes is around $500,000. But the difference here, the caveat is they have 5,700 students. Consequently, we have roughly half that. But our budget is pretty close to their dollar amount. My question is to you people is why is it so high? Why are we spending, what is it, $485,000 we got in the budget? West Haven has roughly that same amount, but twice as many students.
We did make some adjustments to start this year because COVID in August and in September when we started the school year. We increased our building substitutes that are full-time with us. We used to have, I believe, 1 at each elementary school for only 3 days a week, and I believe we had 2, potentially 3 days a week at the middle and high. We increased that number to 15 district-wide, and they're 5 days a week. And one benefit to that is we use Kelly Services for our substitutes, and on a normal substitute day, I believe it's about $125 to pay for a teacher substitute. We are paying our building substitutes $100 today, so there is some savings there. We're mindful of that as well. And I don't know if you have any additional comments about building subs.
Again, one of the things it should be noted too is that it's possibly a negotiating point when it comes up. But again, for long-term substitutes, if you're determined to be a long-term substitute that's going to substitute for a teacher for more than 40 days, you start from day 1 at the base rate divided by days, and you get that rate. It ends up being about $270-something a day. If you're a long-term substitute in other towns, I know Stratford, for instance, you get the going daily rate for the first 40 days, and then after that, you get the increased rate. So that's one reason why the expense in North Haven will be more, the cost for a substitute, a long-term substitute will be more expensive. And this year, we had, due to COVID, more long-term substitutes required. So it appears to be that way year over year. So again, I think that's a negotiating point in the teacher's contract. I can only tell you how it's calculated from a long-term substitute perspective, and that's a significant increase in their cost versus if another town for 40 days you're only paying less than half of what North Haven pays. So
I'm not too sure how West Haven finds their subs. They may be a big enough district where they do not need a service. I believe in years past, prior to me even coming to North Haven, we've used the Kelly Services because when we didn't have a service, it was difficult for us to find quality substitutes. So belonging to that service helps, even though it does cost a little bit more, it ensures we have classrooms covered.
Is that Kelly contract? Is that a?
Yeah, that's Kelly Services, yeah.
Okay, thank you, I'm all set.
Nancy?
Thank you.
Great.
Hello, Patrick. This is Nancy Barrett. I don't know if you can see me, but hopefully you can hear me.
Okay, hello, Ms. Barrett, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So I have a couple of very specific questions and then a few questions kind of at the 30,000-foot level. So beginning this year, we have two special funds that are related to the Board of Education. One is the carryover or surplus from the end of the year, and the other is the Capital Improvement Fund, which we've had for a while now. So for the end of last year, it turns out that the Board of Ed actually, if you combine those two numbers, we had about $850,000 that you have at your disposal. And about $280,000 of that has to be limited to just capital improvements. So again, as Mr. Monaco pointed out, I think that it would be really useful to this board to get any updates going forward for the current fiscal year so that we have this in mind for the purpose of developing the next budget. So that would be really helpful. And I did happen to notice, and I'm not sure that we ever got an answer, that there was an expenditure recently in the capital improvement funds of about $167,000. Any idea, Howard, what exactly that relates to? Was this health reserves, or what exactly was that related to?
I'm not sure. What
okay, we can follow up another time.
I'm not aware of any capital expense that was for that amount. I know we had $96,000 that came out of capital in the beginning of the year for the driveways at Montouise and one of the other schools.
Okay.
I'm not aware.
I can touch base with Ed maybe later and get a sense. I just thought I'd ask since I had you on the line. So, okay, so if we could get an update going forward on those two funds to the extent that you know as we move forward in this year, as well as Patrick, if you have any additional updates on any retirements. I remember last year there were some last minute retirements just before the public hearing that would be useful to know.
We can certainly update you as soon as we know on those.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then again, regarding some of the points that were made regarding remote learning, Patrick, what fraction of students K through 5, middle school and high school are currently remote learning?
So within the opt-out program,
yes,
that's the permanent one.
Exactly.
We have about 400 students in that program. Mm-hmm. From K to 12. It's about 100 or so at the high school, 100 or so at the middle school, and 200 at the elementary. And then it varies on the day and the week and the time of year. If you're looking at before the holidays and whatnot, the number of students and families that choose to remote learn from home for a week, or if they're quarantined, they're learning from home. So really the consistent number there is the 400. Mm-hmm. And on average, at the elementaries, I'd say we're about 15 or 16 students that are choosing to, per school, that are choosing to learn from home. And I'd say that number is significantly higher at the middle and high school. Mm-hmm. Some days are closer to an additional 100 at the high school, and an additional 100 at the middle school. So
opt-out is a permanent status, and then you have individuals that can choose to remote learn for a period of time. And when I say permanent, parents always have the right to change the model in which their children are in instruction. I just call it permanent for the sake of separating from the live streaming part of it. Right. And given that pretty substantial number out of 3,000 total students, if you're talking about between 400 and 600 of them are remote learning, do you get the sense that will translate into reduced costs associated with operating any of the schools in terms of any number of different things?
I don't sign up next year. I know the opt-out program, that the more permanent program, will not exist next year because we didn't begin this year with the capability of live streaming for classrooms. Okay. Now we will start next year with that ability. So students will continue to have that flexibility. We will not have the necessary staff that's currently staffing that opt-out program. That adjustment was made in this current budget to get us down to the 2%. We looked at all staffing and realized that opt-out program, we do have a couple of staff members that are just in that opt-out program or are assigned, that have been reassigned, and will return to their classrooms next year potentially. So that that backfilling of in-person classrooms as well as the opt-out program. Sorry, I'm rambling here.
No.
Those positions won't exist. And so there is some savings there, but that was reflected in the presentation.
Right, okay. Let's see, and again, from kind of the 30,000-foot view, to the extent that it does impact our budget, I'm just interested in knowing if the school enrollment continues to go down. As you know, I'm looking at the historical numbers here over time since 2009. You know, back when we had 4,000 students in the school district, and now it's just a hair over 3,000. If that total school enrollment continues to go down and the budget continues to go up, as Mr. Hallahan pointed out, 5.15% last year and almost 3% the year before, shouldn't the expenditures per pupil increase substantially?
I'm not confident that enrollment will still continue to decrease. This year is an anomaly. I do know that many incoming kindergarten students, and I can't put a number on it to tell you the truth, their families decided not to enroll them into school next year and to wait that extra year. So I'm really anxious to see what our enrollment looks like next year and probably the year after. And we'll probably have a good picture on whether we're holding steady or if there's a significant decrease. When we see enrollment, we'll begin opening. I think kindergarten registration is open now, and it'll be a good idea to see around May how our enrollment looks and get a good picture moving forward.
Right. Well, I'm more basing it, looking at the current high school, where the freshman class is 231, the sophomore is 215, the juniors are 262, and the seniors are at 233. For the next 4 years.
And then we have an 8th grade class, I believe it's close to 280 that's coming in next year.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's one of our bubble years. And I believe the 6th grade class now is a little bit of a bigger class too. So there are these bubble years, and we'll go back and continue to look. As you said, we were at 2009, we were close to 4,000, and 1,000 decrease over roughly 10 years is significant. So it's something we need to keep our eye on.
Yeah, for sure. And again, in terms of looking at the numbers, and we've received awards for safest schools and best place to teach and athletics. But I'm just wondering, to the extent that those awards don't necessarily reflect the student experience, and we are actually paying for 154 students to be not only transported but educated at magnet schools in the area, I'm just somewhat concerned about the perception of our school system. And do you have any idea of the proportion of school-age students in North Haven that actually attend our 6 public schools?
Out of all the students, the percentage that attend in district?
Out of all the school-age children in the town of North Haven,
Yep.
what fraction actually attend our public schools, excluding private schools, obviously, excluding these magnet schools? What fraction actually attend our public schools?
I have to find it out for you.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
That's fine. Okay, and then again, getting back to this critical issue of our town's financial vulnerability related to special education, an issue that Mr. Frieda has brought up, and I've certainly brought up at our Board of Finance. I attempted to address with CCM. I was wondering if either you or Mr. Frieda might give us some sort of an update as to whether there is any attempt to address this at a legislative level in order to make sure that our town is not as vulnerable as it is, given our outstanding special education program that is so attractive to people interested in moving to North Haven.
I know that the organization that I belong to, it's called PAPS, the Connecticut Association of Public Superintendents, presents the legislative slate at the Capitol level, and one of their focuses was to lessen the volatility in special education, to provide a more prescriptive way so districts are not playing catch up in March or April and they realize that students are moving in, students are moving out, and it's impacting the operating budget. So it is being addressed at that level. I know from that organization, and it is conversations I've had with our state representative and senator as well.
Got it. Mr. Frieda, would you like to add to that at all?
No, Patrick's correct. I don't know of any specific movement that will end up passing to address this issue. There was a movement that I was involved with last year, which was an insurance-based model that we saw as executive board members of both Cost and CCM, but it didn't go anywhere because it couldn't get the support. So if I had to predict, I would say not this fiscal year there would be any changes.
Did they ever add a clause about mid-year changes in terms of additional people that we take on in the middle of the year and being able to have a grant money adjusted for that?
Well, part of the insurance-based model that I referenced had some protections in it for that, but beyond that, no.
Nancy, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I just had, again, just one of these very general questions. Does Patrick have any concerns, particularly as a former kindergarten teacher, about the not just the educational needs of our students in North Haven, but also the social, emotional, and developmental needs of the students, in particular those that are K through 5, who are having such a completely different educational experience during the last year? Do you have concerns, and what are the specific steps that are being taken in order to address those?
Well, yes, the broad answer is yes. I'm concerned about not only academic concerns, but also the social emotional learning and the mental health of our students and our staff. Mm-hmm. And some of the steps which I kind of highlighted earlier through a more robust summers program, some extended day tutoring opportunities for students to help them the learning loss, especially as our most neediest learners are our tiered intervention students, our EL students, our students with disabilities, make sure that their accounted works well. And then in addition, part of it within the budget recommendation, we have presented the addition of a additional school psychologist. We also, through some grant money, Jen Stewart, our Director of Student Services, has just hired an elementary school counselor, which will support elementary students in our 4 elementary 4 buildings. So we are focused on that. It is a work in progress, and the money that we just received from ESSER II will go to great lengths to help supporting our students across the board.
Yeah, unfortunately, a school psychologist is not going to replace, circle time, right, in the classroom, sitting on the carpet and so forth. So, and then you mentioned Johnson Controls earlier. Is there any potential benefit to the arrangement that we have with Johnson Controls in terms of being able to upgrade any equipment in any of the school systems based upon, data that's been collected over time?
So I can answer that, Patrick. The benefit originally was $5.9 million in capital expenses taken out of the taxpayers' budgets that they would have had to fund. Mm-hmm. So if we decide there's an expandability to Johnson Controls, we would rely on, Ed and I would do it internally on the town side. We would talk to Howard and Patrick to see if there's any other additional things. And we may not be able to include it in the Johnson Controls performance contract. We may have to go out to bid, but we'd have to check that.
Right.
So the answer is possibly. There could be.
Possibly. Okay,
Yes.
so that's certainly something to factor into budget development. Okay, and then last, I would be remiss, even though I have been a 25-year advocate for education, and as Mr. Hallahan pointed out, we on the Board of Finance have no control over the way that money is spent. I just had some concerns in looking at the BOE administrators' salaries, that in the middle of a pandemic, where the town's unemployment rate has gone from 4 to over 9%, I just had some concerns about the increases, both mid-year as well as the proposed continued increases in administrator salaries, in particular the superintendent, assistant superintendent, director of IT, and director of facilities. I just can't, in good conscience, say that a 10% increase in salary is something that we should all be rallying around. But again, we don't have the ability to control this, unlike in other departments. But I'd just like to call that to everyone's attention. And Patrick, is anything you'd like to say about the administrator salaries?
That, I mean,
I understand your concerns, Mr. Barrett, I do. However, we have highly talented staff here, and we are not, if we look within our DIRG, as far as what the administrative salaries are, we are not high on that, even at the average for the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and the other directors level. We are closer to the bottom of that, of the DIRG, and so we're just, I think the board is making an effort to just be competitive in the salaries they're offering those central office administrative staff.
Okay.
Mr. Frieda?
Thank you.
So I'd just like to make a couple of observations and comments. First, let me start by saying that Ed and I work very closely with Patrick and Howard. We're in constant communication with them. Howard's been a great addition to the Board of Education in terms of being the business manager. Ed and Howard talk on a regular basis, and I'm in constant contact with the chairwoman of the Board of Education. So the communication is outstanding among us. Ed and I know that this budget could have come in higher, but the Board of Education members, Howard and Patrick, were very sensitive to the needs this year of the taxpayers. And they came in with a 2% increase. They were greatly appreciative of the 5.3% increase last year, and they demonstrated, in my opinion, fiscal responsibility in coming to us with this budget. So I thank them for that. Secondly, I'd like to say that when I talk to residential real estate agents, not only who live in the town, but who don't live in the town, and I've spent a lot of time with the Association of Real Estate Agents in my terms here as First Selectman. And I hear the same thing consistently, that there's 3 reasons primarily why people want to move to North Haven, in this order. Number 1, our school system. Number 2, the financial stability of this government. Number 3, the service model that the government and the town offers. And actually there's a 4th reason, economic development. So the number 1 reason when houses go up and there's a short time frame that these homes get sold, when people want to move in, is education. It's those 4 reasons. So I have to commend the Board of Education during difficult times, that there's so much turmoil, there's so much anxiety, there's so much uncertainty, and at a time where it's difficult to keep everybody happy. So I think that this budget that they've come up with is a good budget that demonstrated to Ed and I, and hopefully this Board of Finance, that they're very sensitive to the needs of the taxpayers this year. So thank you.
If I could make just one more comment as the minority representative, in addition to Mr. Hallahan. Just to correct Mr. Frieda's point, last year the Board of Education actually requested an increase of 5.37%. And the Republican members of this board cut their budget by $200,000. So they were actually awarded a 5% increase, not 5.3%.
Well, let me correct you, because I think you advocated for an additional
I certainly did,
for an
but
additional 300,000.
It was denied.
So when we do corrections,
the
you're going
Republicans
to be
actually
corrected
made the
also.
cut. So it was
you-
a 5%, not 5.3%. And I would just like to commend Mr. Stirk on what I believe is a turning of the page in the relationship between the Board of Education and this Board of Finance. As Anita Anderson can absolutely attest, and I can also attest, having been involved in supporting education for many, many years, there was a very contentious relationship between the Board of Education and the Board of Finance, because the Board of Ed historically would request increases, and the Board of Finance over the last 10 years, for many years,
Nancy,
would
you're out of
request
order.
it. And so I would just like
Nancy,
to say I'm very happy
you're
that
out of
in the
order.
last 2 years, Mr. Stirk
Ms.
has
Barrett,
made requests.
You are out of order. This is a budget workshop.
If
You're
Mr. Frieda
taking
is allowed
political-
to make a
you're taking
statement, then I am as well.
You're taking political shots.
This is not political at
reason.
all. This is simply offering the minority party position as the majority party position has just been stated.
We've given you 20 minutes of questions here. I think we're pretty respectful to the minority point of view.
Everyone on this board has been elected to serve the best interests of the town of North Haven. I will not be rushed, and I appreciate having the opportunity
You were
to
not
have
rushed, Ms.
once a
Barrett.
year
Your
the
questions were asked, your questions were answered.
Yes?
The question or the statement you're making now has nothing to do with this workshop. Has nothing to do with the budget in this workshop. You're talking about years past. We're looking at a 21-22 budget. We're not talking about years past.
Yes.
That's what you're doing. Has nothing to do with this workshop. That's how you're out of order.
Mr. Frieda made a statement, and I'm, first of
Mr.
all,
Frieda
correcting it,
responded
and
to your
secondly,
statement
responding.
where you were referring that we reduced the budget last year. That's what he responded to.
My statement was based on the fact that on this budget, they came in with 2%. My statement was based on the fact to give everybody perspective as to why people want to move into North Haven. The number one reason is the education system. So that was what my statement was, and I commend them for that.
And your statement had to do with budgets in the past, nothing to do with this budget.
Mr. Frieda said that Patrick appreciated the 5.3% increase last year, and they did not get a 5.3% increase. So I corrected that. Is that not correct?
And then you went on.
And then I did actually provide some historical perspective. Yes, I did.
May I ask a question, a follow-up on the actual budget in front of us, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Sorry, Patrick or Howard, I should have asked this earlier. Just sort of a broad question, but it is financially related. So when you constructed the budget this year, what assumption did you make with respect to COVID? And what I mean is, obviously, you had a challenging year this year. When you look at the report, and I don't know if you can see this, but this is the one we got for December. It's your year-to-date numbers, and you provided some commentary about where you were vis-a-vis the budget for the current year and where you might end up. But obviously, you have a lot of lines that are over, a lot of them are under. Obviously, cleaning, for instance, you're running about $100,000 over, at least you were, based on this report. So what I'm trying to ask is, we had some savings in certain line areas. I mean, for instance, athletic bus would be one, I'm sure, right? So what assumption did you make as to the state of the school next year when you constructed the budget?
That's a very good question. And we made the assumption, we have many assumptions. We tried to find a nice balance between hopefully returning to some normalcy, while additionally keeping in mind that school may not next year look exactly like it did prior to the pandemic. We will have to account for potentially remote learning. We will have to account for some additional software and licenses and memberships around there. So we weighed everything out and just tried to make it difficult to predict in this time, because from one day to the next, you're in school, you're out of school, or whatnot. So we just tried to do as much research, and Howard was great in this as far as doing a lot of analytical approaches that haven't been as present in the past. So we were able to have some trends to talk through, whether it's utilities to instructional supplies, and really see where we stand there. We've done a lot of investigation with the buildings to see what supplies and materials are left from past years, because we can't just go on what we've always done, because we were out of school for 3 months beginning of March. So it's been a lot of investigative work in trying to come up with a good balance. I know it's not the correct answer to the question, but it's really hard to pinpoint what we think next year is going to look like.
But is it possible that if we go back to, say, full in-person learning, that you might have some additional new expenses, cleaning, maintenance, that come out of this crisis that might drive this budget higher? Is that possible?
I don't believe so. For starting next year, we have every intention of being full in person. That's what we plan for.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any board members have anything else related to this budget?
Yeah, just one question. What is the student attendance now? Are they 2 on and 3 off? Monday, Tuesday, and they're off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the other half is on Thursday, Friday, and they're off Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? How's that? What is the school like today?
Beginning this week, we elementary and middle school are back 5 days. Prior to this, we've been 4 days a week. And the high school, to lessen density, they've been cohorted. So there is a Monday, Tuesday group and a Thursday, Friday group. Beginning next week, each group will go 3 days a week, including that Wednesday. So group 1 will go Monday through Wednesday 1 week. The next week, group 2 at the high school will go Wednesday through Friday. We're making a lot of efforts to, at the high school, we have our students who are identified as special education, as well as students who have a 504. They have the option to come 5 days a week, as well as our EL learners. And we're looking to potentially open it up to other grade levels as well, starting with our senior class to get them back in 5 days a week as well.
So when do you clean the school?
So, in this prior model, we clean every day, but we have a quote unquote deep clean on Wednesdays because it was a change of cohort day and it was like a nice break in the week. But as I mentioned earlier, we are now using $135,000 of that ESSER2 money to provide this deep clean on a daily basis. At all of our schools, we've changed our hours and added, I think, 2 hours at the elementary buildings to account for this. So we can get our students back in 5 days a week.
Thank you.
Michael, you had something?
Very quick, yep. The out-of-district tuition, that is a combination of special ed out-of-district and non-special ed magnet or so forth out-of-district, is that correct?
The majority of
The tuition line.
is students who are identified in special education.
Right. In the current budget expense report, that's showing a possible deficit of around $1 million. Is that figure before reimbursement by any, say, excess cost program?
Yes, or you can elaborate, but yes.
Yeah, sorry. Basically what has happened is that we will not learn the number that we are getting back from the state until around April 1st, March, April timeframe. So right now, we are projecting that at this point in time, there's probably about a 200, if you net that, you'll see the transportation line also is a negative, or is a deficit. You'll see that if you combine those two lines, we are about $200,000, but again, so this is where the variability comes into the special education budget, because we are forecasting that we're only going to get back about 70% of the expense that's allowable to be returned to us. Now, the state, there's been other years where it's been higher than that. It's been 75, 80, 85%. So if the state, because it's getting a lot of money from the federal government, decides that yes, they're going to reimburse at a higher level, that deficit will decrease. That deficit will all completely go away. But right now, that number that you're looking at does not have any reimbursement figures in there at this time.
All right. And so the 154, was that the number of combined special ed and non-special ed out-of-district tuition?
150. Are you talking?
I'm sorry, I heard a number 154 before.
That's
what
the
is-
last page, Mike. That's people. That's bodies.
Yeah. Okay. And so the forecast for next year then is pretty much the same as what you're currently experiencing with those categories?
The out-of-district placements?
Yes.
At this point, yes. We are making efforts to improve our in-district programs in hopes of having students return to our district, but it's hard to predict that because it's really dependent on student need.
Okay, I asked that because it's hard to predict and it's thrown your budget out of whack in certain years when the numbers became less fortunate. But okay, thank you very much.
Anything else for Patrick or Harlan?
Oh, I want to thank them though for the monthly reporting with some comment, and want to encourage more text from them in the future if there's anything that's out of the ordinary or pandemic related, or if there's a necessary capital purchase they see on the horizon. Any text with the expense budget figures is always appreciated.
And thank you to Mr. Wardlow for answering our questions that were emailed to him back in November. Thank you for your communications.
Howard, I like to say I appreciate your approach in projecting out your line items. I do like the analytical approach you've made. Patrick, your business manager did a good job of putting this budget together for you. If there's nothing else, Mr. Frieda?
That's it. Thank you very much, Patrick, Howard, and Board of Education members. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice weekend. Stay safe.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.